All right, welcome everybody to the Validator community discussion. November 10th, 2022. A lot has gone on the past couple weeks since our last meeting. So I'm going to kick it off just by kind of recapping what's happened, all the events. I had to even go back and sort of think through what happened a week ago because, as everyone knows, there's been a lot going on. Do some Validator updates and then talk a little bit about Breakpoint. I know this meeting's a little light on guests or any other topics. So if you have questions, you have stuff you want to talk about, feel free to chime in as well. So yeah, starting off with a review of events, just so we have some of the facts straight before we talk about things. So the first thing that was pretty noteworthy over the past couple weeks is the Hetzner incident. So on Wednesday, November 2nd, Hetzner enforced a policy that basically said that crypto wasn't allowed in their data centers. That took over 20% of the stake offline for mainnet and more than 30% of the stake for testnet offline. The mainnet cluster actually remained in good health when this stake was offline. As you all know, 33% is the halting number. So if more than 33% of stake is offline, the cluster will go offline. But with 20%, it's a fire alarm event. We want to get the stake back up. But then the network actually continued to perform pretty well, even with such a large percentage of stake off. One of the fallouts of this was the Solana Foundation decided to not delegate to any more Hetzner nodes. This is just a reflection of Hetzner's policy. So Hetzner said that crypto is no longer allowed, and they enforced that policy. Now we're just mirroring that policy so that the delegation doesn't delegate to any nodes that are also on Hetzner. Any questions about all that? No? All right. Yeah, so like I mentioned briefly, this also took testnet offline. More of the stake on testnet was on Hetzner than on mainnet. So by Hetzner blocking nodes, it actually took down testnet. There were 3 attempts to revive testnet. So attempt 1 failed just because so much of the stake was still offline and unresponsive. So on the second attempt, the validators decided to exclude some nodes, essentially destake those nodes that weren't able to rejoin the ones that were based in Hetzner. When that second attempt happened, there was a technical issue. Essentially, the shred version in attempt 1 and attempt 2 was the same, which caused some issues. So then for attempt 3, the thing that they did that was different was the ledger tool command had 2 hard forks, 2 different flags for hard fork, which essentially kicked the shred version up a number and got a new shred version. So attempt 3 should have fixed the issue, but there was something else that caused the problem that's still being investigated. So after we restarted with attempt 3, we got to 80% of stake to be back online. But once that 80% was reached, 40% of the stake just never joined the cluster. And we're still investigating why that is. So testnet is still offline as of November 2nd. No updates yet, but you can follow along in, let me get the exact channel here. It is debug testnet restart failure in Discord. So that'll discuss the debug steps and what the engineers are looking at. Any questions on the testnet restart? No. Okay. Then Breakpoint happened. Breakpoint was a great event. It was my first time at Breakpoint, and maybe a lot of yours as well. A lot of good stuff and a lot of good energy there. A couple highlights I'll have after this, but you know, I'd recommend, even if you weren't at Breakpoint or even if you were there, to just go back and check out some of the videos. I think there's a lot of content it's just hard to catch it all, but YouTube has every video out there, so definitely recommend checking it out. And then right after Breakpoint, unfortunately, I'm sure you've all heard the news that FTX is having a lot of problems. Trading on FTX may be halted soon, and the future of the exchange is very, very uncertain. So this obviously has impacts on the entire crypto industry. You know, and I'm sure a lot of you individually may be concerned or hurting because of this. One thing I just want to say, and to sort of draw from my own experiences, is that I feel like being in this community, being in Solana, there's a lot of people who just care about the technology and care about building. And personally, from my vantage point, I see a lot of really engaged validators and a really engaged community. So I just feel like despite everything that's going on, and despite all the uncertainty right now, I feel really strong about the community and really strong about all the good work that people are doing. So just want to echo that, you're not alone. There's a lot of people who are building and doing great things on the platform, including all of you. So thank you for all of that. And, we're always here to help and always here to listen. So just thank you for sticking in there, and thank you for, braving the ups and downs. Any questions on the FTX stuff? Excuse me. No. Anyone here that's listening? Just want to see that we got people engaged. Text or anything? Hi. All right. Thank you. Somebody's out there. Excuse me. One sec. I think I may have also gotten something from Breakpoint, so bear with me while I cough. As a result of the Hetzner issues that I mentioned earlier, there was some confusion about some destaking that was happening at the end of Epoch 370. So at the end of Epoch 370, approximately 29 million SOL was destaked. Earlier in that epoch, the scheduled number was about 63 million SOL, and the large majority of that SOL that was going to get destaked was, well, that additional SOL that was going to be destaked was actually from the Solana Foundation itself. And these were all manual actions taken as part of that Hetzner policy that I mentioned earlier. So there was still a 28.5 million SOL that was planned to be staked to Hetzner going forward. And because of those policies, we wanted to destake that and redistribute the stake to other nodes that weren't on Hetzner. Because of all of the issues with FTX and a lot of just misinformation that was going around, we delayed those destakings. So just want to make that clear that 28.5 million that was planned to be destaked in that epoch was not destaked. The Solana Foundation will destake in a future epoch. Excuse me, one sec. Sorry. So question here. Has the Solana Foundation considered spreading out the 28.5 million destaking across several epochs, like maybe destaking 3 million per epoch or something, so it's not so abrupt? Thank you for the warning. Maybe I should get a COVID test. Yeah, so I don't think we've decided exactly how we're going to do it. I think the destaking by itself is not really I think the destaking in normal climate would be fine. I think it's more just the timing of it coinciding with other sort of major news events made us delay the decision, right? But I don't think destaking and then restaking is any different than any other destaking event that we've done in the past. Maybe I'll just pose the question to you and ask, you know, what's your concern with us destaking and then restaking later on? And there's another question. Yeah, so there's some questions about the stake bot and the delegation program. When's it going to come back online? There's some issues with StakeBot right now. Partially, it's due to the fact that testnet is down. So a lot of the performance metrics that the StakeBot uses for mainnet is reliant on the operator maintaining a testnet node. And while testnet is down, that data can't be retrieved, right? So I think some of this is dependent on testnet getting back up. There's also a question about the validators who set their commission to 100% before the end of epochs to gain 100% of commissions rather than 10%, which is the max. Any validator that does that in the delegation program will be ejected from the program permanently. So I know a lot of you have raised concerns about this. I assure you 100% that people who are doing that will get kicked out. The last few days has been pretty hectic and a lot's been going on. So that hasn't been the priority over the last few days, but I can guarantee you that that will not last for very long and they will get rejected from the program. Another question there from Soul Blaze. My take is that most people have become more aware, sensitive of such large destakings. So perhaps the sentiment of 28.5 million may be different in the future than it is in the past, even months after the FTX incident subsides. Yeah, so that's a good point. I think in the future we would probably be more careful about such large stake movements and maybe communicate it a little bit better ahead of time. I think the biggest problem there was that it was such a large stake movement that coincided with such a big news event. So there was just a lot of misinformation going around, right? And I think that misinformation just snowballed a bit. People started speculating where the stake was coming from. You know, I'm sure a lot of you probably knew who the stake authority was for the delegation stake bot. If you did some research and dug in, you probably could have figured it out on your own. But a lot of people outside of the community probably don't know that technical level of detail or do that research. So I think communication is key there. If we ever have such a large stake movement again, we would want to communicate well in advance why it's happening, what we're doing. And yeah, maybe we'll break it up. The exact implementation of when we do the restaking isn't figured out yet. Yeah. And just another comment there about manually destaking people that are gaming the commission, going to 100%. Yes, we can do that. And that's in the plans, right? So I think, again, like I mentioned, anyone that is jacking up their commissions to 100% to essentially steal from the foundation delegation program will get ejected. Excuse me. Okay. Any more questions on this or anything I missed? All right. Cool. Okay, so those are all the sort of recaps of the week. Like I mentioned, I'll talk a little bit about Breakpoint after this. But one thing I want to mention before we get into that is 1.13.4 is now the recommended version for mainnet. This version will essentially, the main difference here is that it turns off the UDP UDP port, excuse me, UDP for the TPU port by default, and makes quick the default for those TPU ports. This is, quick by default on mainnet, which is a really cool achievement and really awesome sort of milestone for the network. So kudos to everyone for participating and being a part of that. 1 second. Sorry. So quick by default's awesome. More to come in 1.14, but great achievement by the engineering team, by the validators, by everyone involved. So kudos to everyone. And please upgrade if you have not. Okay. Any questions on that update before I move on to the breakpoint notes? Thank you. There's a note just about me running this meeting. I am feeling sick and I'm also fresh off a plane, so didn't get a lot of sleep. I apologize. All right, breakpoint. Oh, sorry, what question I missed? When will testnet be launched? So testnet is down and the fix right now is unknown, still being investigated. Like I mentioned before, you can follow along in that Discord channel, debug testnet restart failures. Once there's a solution or once there's sort of a way forward, I'll communicate that to the validators at large and testnet validators. But until then, it's just a matter of more investigation. And when is there going to be an official announcement of Inflect, StackPath, and Equinix joining TDS 2022? That will probably be very soon. I think there's just a couple of last-minute technical things we need to work out before they're officially part of TDS 2022, but the plan is for them to join relatively soon. Okay, so breakpoint happened, and I just want to point out that this is my first breakpoint, like I mentioned earlier. I think it was a huge success. It really is unfortunate that so much news has been going on before and after breakpoint that maybe just took away some of the news cycles around how much good stuff came out of breakpoint, how much energy there was at the event. One thing I really want to highlight is just go back and watch some videos and get a sense of all the cool things that are being built on Solana in the ecosystem. Really cool, inspiring stuff. One thing that I highly recommend everyone who's involved in running a validator to check out is both of these FireDancer talks. So the intro talk, sort of just a high level about what FireDancer is and what they're building. And then this technical deep dive talk can both be found on YouTube pretty easily if you just search FireDancer breakpoint. This deep dive is a real impressive run through of the components of the validator that they're rebuilding, how much performance they can get out of the machine when they really sort of essentially push the operating system aside, allocate some memory, and then really efficiently operate that memory. So pretty cool stuff. Highly recommend it. A lot of this honestly is a deeper dive than I can even follow at some points, but really cool stuff. And would just recommend checking it out because I think, in the future, one of you maybe, or many of you even may be running this client. So good to see what's going on, get involved. Oh yeah, okay, there's a question about, is there a public release of FireDancer yet? FireDancer is an open source project. It's open source from the start. You can go to their GitHub repo and check out the code. And if you follow along these talks, you could actually run the client yourself. There's, as far as I know, it's mostly just a simulation right now. So I don't believe that you can actually use their code in a production client, but they're making a lot of good progress. So I'd really suggest checking out the GitHub and just seeing kind of the updates and seeing what's happening there, because I think sooner rather than later there'll be something that's usable in production. Yeah, and the link's there in the chat. github.com/firedancer-io/firedancer. Another thing that I want to talk about that came out of Breakpoint was a lot of chats were happening about process and how we do things in the community, what pain points there are as far as getting changes into the validator, discussion about what should be changed and how. All those things are happening, but maybe not communicated as well, or maybe people just don't know where to go and look for these chats, and more people maybe want to get involved who just don't know how to get involved. So because of all these chats happening, we had a little mini meeting at Breakpoint. The idea was just to get together with all the different people who were chatting and have a preliminary talk on things that we can do to improve the process. Nothing there was finalized. No like action items necessarily were taken at that meeting. But some of the key things I want to talk about is that validators in the community were mostly looking for a place to discuss things that's a little more longer lasting. The key thing that I got there was that Discord, and I agree with this, Discord is a little bit too ephemeral, right? As soon as you say something in Discord, you might get blown away with 1,000 messages about something else. And that maybe really well thought out statement was sort of drowned out by other chatter. So one maybe solution to that problem, one idea that people were thinking about and discussing a bit at this meeting was a forum or some sort of place that's a little bit more moderated and curated, could exist, where we talk about changes, proposals, things like that. Excuse me. Yeah, I think that's sort of the high level of the meeting. I think there'll be more to come out of this, and I think we'll move the community a little bit forward in like ways that we can communicate with the validators, with core engineering, with the FireDancer team, so that we have sort of a more robust process for proposing changes. But any feedback or thoughts along this lines along these lines that people are thinking right now? There's a question in chat. I believe Discord now has a forums type channel feature that we could use to keep everything in the same place, while also having a forum area for longer lasting topic discussions without having a ton of extra channels. I'm not super familiar with the forum type channels. Maybe if you can expand on that a little bit, or I'll just take an action item to check it out as well. Another thing I want to plug here actually is there is already a proposal process in place in GitHub that Jacob Creech made. Let me find that real quick. It is called the Solana Improvement Documents. Here. So this process is one that was created internally and sort of vetted out by engineers and by other people, I guess, sort of in the internal ecosystem. It could definitely be a process that is adopted going forward. It has all the different requirements that people mentioned in this meeting. I think the one thing that maybe we could use a little bit more work on is discoverability here. So I encourage any of you to check out this Solana improvement document. If you go to pull requests, there's a couple improvement documents mentioned. The first one, Solana improvement document 0001, talks about the process. So a good place to check out and potentially propose changes there. Any questions or thoughts about this? We'll probably be talking about this more and more going forward, but just wanted to put it out there now. No? Any questions that people have in general? That's all I have for today. So open Q&A now if people want to bring up any other topics. No? All right. Well, I just want to close the... Oh, there's one. Excuse me. So a comment here in chat, I think it may also be good to have some redundancy in case Discord goes offline during a restart attempt. If there is some backup communication method that was more structured than shared contacts, that might be helpful. Yeah, I agree with that. I think for something like a restart, we are pretty reliant on Discord. We do have an email blast, email alert, Solana alerts tool that could also be usable during a restart, but that's more for announcements and not so much for like discussion on how we would do the restart, you know, sort of the lead up to the restart instructions. So yeah, I agree. There would be other places that we would have to chat. Something like Telegram might be good. We should probably at least come up with a protocol if for whatever reason Discord's down. Yeah. There is a validators group from Breakpoint that anyone could join, so that could be a place. There's also a Solana ecosystem Telegram group in case of emergency. That could be a place. But we could probably discuss that and come up with something that makes sense. Something I think to discuss in Discord. Oh, excuse me. All right. Well, thank you all for joining early, late, or middle of the day, depending on where you are. I'm not sure about the next meeting, if and when we're going to have it, because that falls on an American holiday, so I won't be available most likely. Thank you. I'm trying to get well. I feel like I've been coughing for the last 2 months straight, so hopefully I can get over this soon. But yeah, like I mentioned, the next meeting is on Thanksgiving in the US, so we may or may not have that one. I'll communicate about it coming up. But otherwise, I will see you all soon. Thank you all, and thank you for being involved in the community. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.